What's good, my dear language learning master? And welcome to a new episode of the Language Input podcast, in which, as you know, I'm gonna talk about different topics related to language learning, with the goal of helping as many people as possible realize that we can all learn any language while enjoying the process every step of the way. I'm totally convinced. Yeah, and also to help you realize that if you haven't been able to learn languages so far, it's not your fault. It's not that you're not talented at languages. No, it's just the way we've been taught languages should be learned is just wrong, like flat out wrong, right? Okay. So that's my main goal with this podcast. And yeah. So with that being said, let's get into today's topic. And today I want to talk about the stages you're going to go through when learning a new language from scratch, actually. And well, I'll get more specific in a moment, but as I've talked about many times, comprehensible input is the key to the entire process. All right, we already know that. So we learn a language by understanding what we listen to and read, and eventually our ability to communicate, to speak and write will show up. All right, so that's the most important thing to understand. Like, we learn a language by listening and reading, and eventually our ability to communicate, to speak and write, like I said, shows up. All right, so to put it into simple words, when we speak, we're not improving. When we speak, we're showing what we've already learned through comprehensible input, if that makes sense. Okay? All right. So as you'll see, that's going to be the theme throughout the entire episode, but like I said, let's get more specific. Okay? Cool. So let's go with stage number one. And this stage is when we're starting a new language from scratch. We have no knowledge whatsoever of that language. And as I've said many times, when you're starting a new language from scratch, you're probably going to need language classes. Obviously, language classes based on the right principles. Yeah, I'm not talking about traditional grammar classes, obviously. But, unless we're talking about two related languages, like Italian in my case as a native Spanish speaker, in which you can actually pull it off. You can start watching cartoons and very simple resources even from scratch because of the similarities between both languages, but in most cases you won't. Like, even the most simple resources not going to be comprehensible for you. So I do believe language classes are, with following the right principles, language classes are the most interesting and the main resource here in order to help you improve, your understanding, improve your knowledge of the language. Okay. And obviously at this point, all you need to focus on is getting comprehensible input, right? And not worry at all about speaking. Mainly because you can't, you're just getting started with the language, and obviously, you can't say anything yet, and you can't communicate, and that's fine. It's just how it works. We see it with kids all the time. When they're starting to when they're starting to listen to the native language, they can communicate. Even when they're 8 months old, a year old, they can already understand a lot, but they can't say anything yet. All right, and the fact that they can say anything doesn't mean that the process is not working. It actually is. All right, so yeah. So like I said, all you need to focus on here is comprehensible input. That's the key to the entire process, but even more so right here at the beginning. Okay. So that's pretty much stage number one. And then moving on to stage number two, after some classes, in which a teacher that follows the right principle it's gonna help you, improve your understanding of the language. It's gonna help you, make the first steps. You'll get to a second stage in which still all you need to focus on is comprehensible input, but you've already gotten to a point in which you can start understanding simple resources on your own, like I talked about in the episode about the best resources for beginners, like cartoons, comic books. I don't know what else. Yeah, like cartoon, comic books, even like super simple language exchanges. But anyway, probably cartoons or YouTube channels about stories, sort of adapted for kids or for beginners. Just YouTube channels in which teachers upload videos based on the right principles, like I said, in which they tell stories or they play games. Because at the end of the day, one of the main differences between kids with the native language and us adults with a second language or a new language, is simply the amount of time they're exposed to the language, right? They're listening to the language pretty much 24/7, while we adults usually settle for a couple of hours classes per week, right? And there's a huge gap there. There's a huge difference between both. And so at this point, while you can certainly continue with those classes, if you start to build a habit of watching cartoons for 15, 20 minutes a day, and you start reading as well, I'm obviously I'm not talking about exercises, grammar exercises or stuff like that. No, because I myself spend 0 minutes on that matter, all right, on studying the language consciously and so on. So I'd never recommend that. But I'm talking about, like I said, watching cartoons for 15 minutes a day, 15, 20 minutes. Even if it even if it looks really simple like cartoons, I do understand that they might not be, the most interesting resource for us adults. But, I tend to look at them as a sort of transition resource that's going to give me access to more interesting and complex resources, all right? And actually, they're not that bad, you end up enjoying them. At least that happened to me. Because, also the being able to understand a new language is, is such a rewarding feeling in itself that you're not going to care that much, all right? And the reason I'm talking about these habits is just the simple habit of watching cartoons for 20 minutes a day in the second stage. You're going to get exposed to the language, 5 hours a week, as opposed to 2 when you were just attending classes, all right? And, that's going to make a difference. That's going to speed things up, and it's going to help you keep getting better and better, all right? And once again, you're not going to be able to communicate in the language in this stage, but that's totally fine. That's okay. That's how the process works, okay? All you need to focus on is on continue to get comprehensible input. If you're doing that, the process is working. If you understand what you're listening to or reading, the process is working. It's that simple, believe me. Okay. And actually, somewhere in this stage, this is all approximate, all right? Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same for everyone, but just approximately in this second stage, you realize that you're going to start, I don't even know how to explain it, but or what words to use, but you're going to start sort of building sentences in your head, like just randomly, like out of the blue. One day you're just sitting and you're thinking about, specific sentences. You're in your mind. I'm sure you can relate to it somehow. So let me know as usual in the comment section. But yeah, I'm sure it happens to you. But anyway, so to sum things up here in stage number 2, continue to focus on getting comprehensible input and don't worry at all about not being able to communicate. Because like I said, in in a past episode, I believe the number one cause of frustration in a language student is not being able to communicate the way they'd like to at any given point, right? And that's just how the process works. Okay, we all want to be able to communicate in the language we're learning. I get that, but it's just how the process works. It's how the language mechanism works in our head, and that's fine. So yeah, don't try to force output. Don't try to force the issue when it comes to speaking. Because that's only gonna bring frustration, like I said. All right. Anyway, so let's move on to stage number 3. And stage number 3 to me is like, that's the most important step. Like, this is the moment we've been waiting for, right? Like that moment in which we can start communicating naturally, which is unbelievable, because we've been following the right principles, we've been focusing on comprehensible input, and finally we're going to get to a point in which we start being able to communicate in the language, okay, and naturally, like I said. And obviously at this point there's still a lot of room for improvement, huge room for improvement. So I'm not talking about fluency here, but you're gonna start to realize that you can actually communicate naturally with friends or or people from other countries that you're talking with, just on language exchanges, on stuff like that. And obviously, you're just gonna talk about life topics and not super complicated stuff, but you'll see that you can actually communicate in a new language, which is priceless, right? And all you've done so far in order to get there is, just fun and enjoyable classes, different resources. It's just, I don't want to say effortless, but it's pretty close to it, because you're enjoying activities like I said, like you're creating stories in class, you're playing games, you're listening to cartoons at the beginning, like I said, you're reading comic books, you start to listen to, or you start to watch documentaries about whatever topic you're interested in. So it's actually fun, right? Cool. But again, even though you start being able to communicate at this stage, again, all you need to focus on is comprehensible input. Getting comprehensible input. That's all you need in order to getting better, in order to keep improving. Okay, that's the main thing. That's the key to the entire process. I'll repeat it over and over again. And here, the good news here, or the better news here is, you can start watching, different resources, or more interesting resources for us adults. Like I said, documentaries, even sport games, sport events in general. You can start reading, like young adult books, even adult books, quote unquote. You're gonna start listening to podcasts on whatever topic you're interested in. So pretty much all you're doing right now is you're consuming the same type of content you were already consuming in your own native language. So that's why I was talking about effortless before, because if you were already listening to podcasts in your own native language, you're gonna be able to listen to podcasts in your target language in this case, and you're gonna continue to get better while enjoying the activity, because they're talking about a topic that you're interested in, right? And like I said again, because of how interesting that specific resource is for you, you're actually gonna listen to it because you're interested in what they're talking about and not on the language itself. All right. Obviously, you do have the goal in the back of your mind of keep on getting better at it. But if you're interested in, I don't know, history, and you start listening to history podcasts or watching history documentaries, it's just so fun for you. You're so interested in the topic itself that you're nearly gonna forget that you're listening to a foreign language, which is again priceless, right? and a great feeling. So yeah, to sum things up here again, you start being able to communicate, and it doesn't mean it's nowhere near fluency. So I'm just talking about being able to communicate, like I talked about in my example with Italian. That I got to a point in which I could communicate with my friends, when going for a beer or when hanging out with them, and of course still a lot of room for improvement, but that feeling is just priceless. And I know what I need to keep focusing on in order to get better is comprehensible input. Again, you guessed it, yeah. All right. And of course, even at this point, if you can't communicate the way you'd like to, it's okay. Again, like it's not that the process is not working. Like I said, it's not that you're not talented at languages. It's not that you're not gonna get there. You will. If you keep focusing on comprehensible input, you will. And it's just, again, it's how the process works in our brain. All right. So you're starting to realize, the main theme here is all you need to focus on is comprehensible input. And how to put this into words? Like, the way you can communicate at a certain point is just the way you can communicate. I mean, there's no way to force it, if that makes sense. Like, if you keep focusing on comprehensible input, you're gonna keep getting better. But at any given point, if you can say the things you'd like to say, it's okay and it's natural, and it just means you need to keep focusing on comprehensible input. I'm repeating myself, I know, but I think it's the entire key. So I understand the reason why we get frustrated. I do myself, all right, but there's actually no reason to get frustrated because we just know what we know at a specific point. Okay. Anyway. And finally, let's go to stage number 4, in which, after focusing on more and more comprehensible input, and, now that we can understand pretty much anything, we can start watching series and movies and reading any type of book and anything we're interested in. Or, we can start hanging out with friends in a supernatural scenario in which we can perfectly communicate with them, all right? We can listen to any type of podcast we're interested in, whatever the topic. At this point, we can actually understand pretty much anything. And again, this is the point in which you might be looking at 2-3 hours of comprehensible input a day, and you don't even realize it because you're doing super fun activities that, like I said before, you were already doing in your own native language, so it doesn't feel like learning at all. It's just fun, right? And you're hanging out with friends, you're watching series, or I get back keep getting back to that effortless word that I use, but that's pretty much it. It's just fun, it's just interesting, it's just you're enjoying the process every step of the way, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, and that's priceless once again. And again, even though you can perfectly communicate in the language at this point, still, if you want to keep getting better and the closest possible to native-like, all you need to focus on is comprehensible input, okay? And obviously, when I'm talking about the fact that when you speak or when you produce output, you're not improving directly. Okay, so if you're engaging in a conversation with another person, with a native speaker, let's put it this way, when you're speaking, you're not improving. Okay, but indirectly, when you're talking to someone, they're gonna reply, right? They're gonna talk back to you. So then you are improving because you're getting comprehensible input from that person. Okay. So even though when I'm talking about communicating or speaking or producing output, or like that part in which we're actually speaking is not helping us improve, but rather we're showing what we've already learned through comprehensible input, like I said. But when you get engaged when you engage in in conversations with native speakers like that, you're gonna get responses, right? So you're gonna be able to get even more comprehensible input, which is all you need throughout the entire process. Okay, all right. So that's pretty much, to me, if I were to break it down into 4 different stages, that'd be it. And it obviously, it's not obviously the same way, and it depends on the language as well, like I said at the beginning. But that's pretty much what I've seen in myself, in my students, in a lot of people. I mean, pretty much in everyone, because that's how the language mechanism works. All right. So, yeah. So to wrap things up here, you got the theme here, right? Focus on comprehensible input. That's all you need. And whatever stage you're on, if you can't communicate the way you'd like to, it's normal. All right? There's no reason to get frustrated. And again, I do understand the feeling. I've felt it myself, but there's no reason for it. Okay? Because like I said in the episode in which I talked about the number one cause of frustration, because of the traditional grammar approach and because of certain beliefs, like the fact that we think or we believe that if we can understand this much, we should be able to produce that much as well. I mean, like that same much, if that makes sense, okay? But it's just not how the process works. Our ability to understand, it's always way ahead of our ability to communicate, to speak. It's just how the process works in our brain, okay? And we see it every single day with kids and the native language. And it's a process that works 100% of the time. So, let's use the same principles, right? All right. So anyway, how you found it useful, and I hope it helped you relax, because again, I see it all the time. Not being able to communicate the way we'd like to is the number one cause of frustration by far. And it shouldn't be, because it doesn't mean that it's not working or that you're not talented for languages, like I said. It just means you need to keep focusing on comprehensible input, and you'll get there later. You will, believe me. All right. So, well, as usual, if you're listening to this on YouTube or any other platform where you can leave your messages, feel free to do so, and let me know what you think of today's episode, of the entire project as a whole, or any question you may have when it comes to the language learning process, etc. Because I'll be more than happy to help you out. And with that being said, I wish you a good day, whatever you might be, my dear language learning master, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.